Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Soo Amaziing, and I'm here with a video on the best graphic settings for PC on Modern Warfare 2 2022. We're gonna jump right into this. First things first, on display mode, we got full screen exclusive. This makes it so that's the only thing running on the screen for your PC. Best FPS you get with this. You want to have your default display monitor there, your adapter, which is your GPU. Make sure you have your screen refresh rate the same as your monitor. Display resolution, whatever you're gonna put on, whether that's 1080, 1440, 4K, throw that on. Now, dynamic resolution, you want to make sure that this is off. Same thing goes for VSync on gameplay or menu, wherever it's at, take it off. Custom frame rate limit, you want to make this. So I have a 144 monitor, right? That's the hertz that I can do. That's the max hertz I have. So I throw it up to 160 for the gameplay, so that my PC doesn't ever go over 160. It will always stay there, and it will stay at it will maintain a steady frame rate. It wouldn't be overclocking. For the menu, you don't need more than 60 at all. Leave it capped at 60. There's no reason to go higher than that. It's pointless. Now, for the autofocus, custom frame rate limit, same thing. Leave it out on 30. Make it so your PC runs, nice and calm when you're autofocus. You don't need any frames, pretty much, when you're not paying attention to the game. You just have that there in the background. So 30 is good for that. These two things are, if you're having problems like you're lagging or you're choppy, your frame rate is choppy and stuff, you want to do this, restart the shaders, and it'll basically re-optimize all shaders. It says it right there, self-explanatory. For the display gamma, so if you're playing on a monitor, nice little PC monitor, you want to leave this on 2.2. Now, if you're on a big, like 60, 50 inch TV, whatever, you want to throw this on 2.4. For the brightness, you don't want to go too bright. I like to leave it at 55. You can go up to 60 if your monitor is a little darker than the regular. 55 to like 65 is a good little middle ground, but you definitely want to turn it up a little bit. You don't want to leave it default. It's too dark. Focus mode completely off. Don't need that. High dynamic range. I would leave this off, honestly. But if you have a strong PC and like your screen can handle it and all that, then I guess you want to turn it on, maybe for campaign. But it's really not. Just leave this off, honestly. Moving on to the quality. So for your render resolution, make sure this is on 100, so you get 100% of your render resolution. Pretty self-explanatory. Upscaling / sharpening. Now this one really depends on your build, but for most builds, Fidelity FX cast is gonna be the clearest one, the clearest picture you can get without losing that many frames. But if you want to get the most frames and your picture's gonna be a little blurry, go for the AMD FSR. I heard that is really good for getting you more frames for performance, but the visual department is not cutting. So we're gonna go ahead and leave that on Fidelity cast. But before you move on, press X, your show more button, whatever button that is for you. Make sure you turn this up. It's gonna be like around 50 or 60, something like that. Turn this up to like 75-ish, maybe 80, and then test it out. But 75 is a good middle ground. It will make your picture a lot more clear. Trust me. Anti-aliasing, we can't remove it. Don't know why, so just put as the SMAA. Because the filmic is trash. Anti-aliasing quality low. These right here, they eat up some performance. Video memory scale. So for this one, you want to turn this up all the way as high as you can. If you feel like if you're recording and you're getting some performance hitches, you want to turn this down maybe to 80. Maybe to 80. Something like that, and it'll probably be a little bit better. But for most guys that are just gonna play, turn it up as much as you can. Now, moving on to the texture resolution. This has a pretty decent impact on your frames. You can go to normal. I would say if you have a stronger GPU, maybe like a 30 series, I would say go to normal if you still want to maintain high frame rate and a decent visual. But if you have a lower, medium to like lower NPC, or you want extremely high frames, which is what I'm trying to do, because I have like more like a medium build, but I want to have higher frames, keep this on low. Because honestly, from normal to low, it's not really like a huge difference, and it looks decent. Like, it's not bad at all. You got good frames too. Now for the texture filter, leave this on high, because if you put it on low, you lose performance somehow. So just leave it on high. The game looks better and you get more frames, so it's a win-win. Nearby level of detail, don't even notice this, keep that on low. Distant level of detail, same thing, low. You're not going to be looking at details from a distance anyway. Clutter draw distance, short. Particle quality, now this one, if you leave it on low, it looks horrendous. And it doesn't really have a big effect on frames, so you want to go ahead and leave this on high. Particle quality level though, you want to leave this on low, because this will definitely affect your frames more or less. Low or normal, depending on your build, you could mix match the options, but I want max frame rate. Like, that's what I'm mainly going for right now, frames. So we're gonna keep that on low. Bullet impacts and sprays, I feel like this doesn't really have a big impact on frames, but I would say keep it on, because it's a good visual cue on where your enemies are. Because you can be getting shot from a certain angle or whatever, and you see the bullets come and hit the wall, so you look the opposite direction, you know where he's at. If you take this off, you're not going to see no bullet holes, so leave this on. Shader quality, we're going to leave this low. Don't really need that. That's for, like, you know, it says it right there, lighting and treatment on some services. You're not going to be paying attention to that when you're blasting heads on multiple. So leave that on low, because you're going for frame. Tessellation, turn that off. Garbage, and it takes up frame. Well, it's not garbage. It looks cool, but it's not something you can really notice, and you want frames for gameplay. So leave that off. Terrain memory, you want the max memory here. You want to have all your terrains loaded up and all that. On-demand texture streaming, make sure you disable this, because if you don't, your game eventually, if after a long play session, you're gonna start like having pop-ins and weird stuff happening. Just leave this off. Streaming quality, didn't really notice a difference, but I did notice a difference on the frames, so I want to leave this on low. Volumetric quality, that's for like fog and all that. Nobody's paying attention to that when we're playing online. We need frames, baby. So we're taking that off on low. Deferred physics quality, same thing, off. Quality, water caustics. This really didn't have a difference. So you can leave that on or off. It doesn't even really matter, to be 100% honest. I would probably actually leave this off. Moving on to the shadow and lighting. So this right here is the big culprit on your frames right here. The one that likes to steal your frames is this guy right here. If you can't deal with the very low textures of the shadows, then like me, it looks really horrible. Just leave it on low. But if you really want the most frames, leave it on very low. But low, I keep it there so that, because it doesn't look that horrible and you still get good frames. Normal is if you have a higher end GP. Is if you really can't stand low shadows and stuff like that. So I would keep it on low if you're going for max frames and you don't really care about shadow. Screen space shadows, take that off. On top of the fact that it takes frames, when you're looking at a glass, sometimes the reflection gets in the way, and if somebody's on the other side of that glass, I was gonna have a hard time looking at that person and trying to shoot him in his face. So take that off. Spot shadow quality, keep that on low, because we're not really, using shadows and stuff like that. We're not really going for shadows and no visuals, none of that. Spot cases, same thing. That's for light shadows. Low. Particle lighting. This has a decent little a decent effect on your GPU as well, or should I say a decent effect on your frames. You want to keep this on low. If you have a higher end GPU, of course you could throw that up to normal. Ambient occlusion, we're gonna go ahead and take that completely off so that we can get the most frames, and it doesn't really even look that good anyways. And make sure your map a little darker and stuff. Now for the screen space reflections, we're gonna keep that off. Same thing, it has reflections and makes the reflections look better, but who's paying attention to reflections? So we're taking that off. Static reflection quality, same thing, put that on low. Weather grid volumes, same thing, keep that on off. Now for your NVIDIA reflex, low latency. So if you have a strong GPU but a decent to meh CPU, you want to have this on plus boost. Now if your GPU and CPU are around the same level, then you want to have this on. And then of course depth of field, word, motion blur, and film grain for every single game you play. Everybody knows this. Take that shit off. It's garbage. So now we're moving on to the view. Field of view. If you're not used to this, I strongly recommend working your way up to 120 because you're gonna feel weird if you go straight from 80. 80 is the default for consoles, but if you throw this up from 80 to 120, it's gonna be like you're gonna be very like disoriented. So I would say work up to it. Maybe start at 100, then move your way up to 110. Then after that, you go to 120, and then you Gucci. Make sure this ADS field of view is affected so that your field of view affects both your ADS and your camera, your regular moving around camera. The weapon field of view. So I was messing around with this a little bit, and I've come to the conclusion that this is garbage. I mean, if you have it too narrow, your weapon is too big, and your aim is taking up the whole screen, so you can't really see people off to the side. Now, if it's wide, the weapon looks smaller, but then your iron sights are also smaller, and it's not. Just leave it on default. The best thing for this is to leave it on default. Third person field of view, you want to turn this up to 90 ASAP. Vehicle field of view, put this on wide so you can see more of your surroundings when you're in a vehicle. Now for the camera, definitely take this off. Put that on least 50%. Same thing for third person camera, put that on 50%. That affects your camera shake when people throw grenades and they're next to you and stuff like that, and your camera starts shaking crazy. It makes it so it stabilizes. It doesn't really do it as much. And you can have better accuracy, better awareness, and better everything. Third person ADS transition, the default is third person ADS. This is personal preference, whatever you want, but I would say third person ADS is better. Default spectator camera, I would say game perspective is better. That's the original perspective, but if you like that little helmet thing they did this year, be my guest. Now we're gonna go to the interface. You want to make sure you go down to telemetry and you turn your FPS counter on so that you can make sure you're getting the frames that you want. You can also turn on the server latency and packet loss if you really want to see if you're lagging and stuff, but I don't say that's really necessary. But you definitely want to have the FPS counter on. Alright guys, that's my video on the best PC settings so far, so you get the max frame rate performance. You already know the vibes. It's your boy Soo Amaziing, and I'm out of here. Deuces.